Hey all, what's up? Thought I would go ahead here on this Tuesday. Go ahead and put this up. I know how much you love to watch the videos and the track record on YouTube. I got a 95 bio tours and you watch it, 6 of you. So anyway, but hey, here it is. Okay. So hey, a little bit on that. I uploaded the chordates, which is remember vertebrates, all the 3 classes of fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. We're going to start on that. We're going to get started on this week. Obviously, crazy weather, cold weather. So it's Tuesday here. A couple things I reminded you is assignments first couple weeks here. Saw a lot of missing things. I know some of you are also doing that paper copies. That's fine. Just whenever I see you, turn them in. But by me putting zeros in there, that's at least letting you know I don't have a copy of it, whether it's electronically, which I will go back and look in that as I always do regularly. And then of course, next time when I see you, whenever that is, you can turn in the hard copies here, so don't panic on that. Just my way of reminding you, make sure you stay in front of everything, okay? All right, so I uploaded just a quick little, crash course on chordates, which was this kind of the standard thing we've been doing about a little 11 minutes. It's a good little, it's kind of like the modern Bill Nye guy. He does a nice job kind of introducing the wide range of those. And then this quick little fish PowerPoint over the 3 classes, but what we really will be focusing on is the chondrichthyes, which are the cartilaginous, the sharks, skates, and rays, more specifically sharks because they're really cool and fun. All right, so this is just a real quick overlay of vertebrates. So basically, what is a fish? Okay, obviously a vertebrate, meaning they have a spinal cord, a spinal cord with an infused, vertebral column around it, protected. Okay. Belongs to the phylum Chordata, which you're familiar with though, which is one of the main phylums we were studying all the time, other than arthropods. This means that fish and other vertebrates have at some time during the development a notochord. Remember, notochord is a node the thing for a hollow like a straw, where the spinal cord runs through it to the central nervous system. Hollow dorsal nerve cord. They also have pharyngeal slits, gills, same thing, just the proper term for it. And some type of a tail. In most vertebrates, the notochord is replaced by a backbone or a vertebral column. Okay, so that is the term notochord. That as they come, but we just kind of lump it all in. It's the same general term. Okay. Okay, so this doesn't look like much to you, but from fossilized chordate, we're talking Cambrian explosion, which is the point where we found all the fossils millions of years ago in shale and sandstone and imprints like that. So these little things, I believe this is a tunicate, I think, but it doesn't look like much, but it was the earliest vertebrate fossils that we found way back. And what they're showing here is obviously this is a little, colored version of it, but in imprints left in ancient rocks that using radioactive dating, we know these are the earliest things. We saw imprintations of a hollow nerve cord here, which ran along the top of the notochord, which eventually was a spinal cord. This thing is eventually what they talked about infused around to protect the nerve cord, which became like a vertebral column, but it was there. These are to represent kind of the muscle segmentation of that. These are what they also call the pharyngeal slits, which were the gills that eventually, in your first chordates, kind of had what they refer to the jawless group of fish. So it was basically kind of like remora type things and lampreys, which are a couple of the species or genuses of the jawless fish that are still alive today. But they're pretty simple. They were just kind of these kind of finger-looking structures, very small in size, but the earliest vertebrates because from the fossilized remains we found. Okay, so that's what that is. I believe they're tunicates is what they're called, if I remember right. Okay. So like I said, fish can be defined as aquatic vertebrates that are characterized by scales, fins, and gills. Okay. However, there are always expectations. Some fish don't have scales. Made up of the 4 classes. 3 classes are only alive today, so we're not going to talk about the armor-plated Polyplacophora type stuff and the ones you would see in those animated millions of years type, prehistoric type aquatic little educational videos that we may have seen. That class is gone, but they're pretty sure from that class is where it gave rise to the other 3, which are the Agatha, chondrichthyes, and osteichthyes, which I'll explain those. Okay. But as we know with a lot of them, not all have scales. There are modifications, like we saw with trout and catfish and various other ones. But for the most part, we say scales. Okay, but just like in nature, there's always those things that are kind of the tweeners, we call them, or kind of the gray areas with the group. But for the most part, they're lumped into this category. Okay. All right. So I tried to add here, but basically you have, these are the common names. Jawless fish, which means Agatha, A-G-H-T-H-A, okay? And I was gonna add it in the slide, but this is an older PowerPoint and they won't let me modify it because of updates. But your Agatha, if you notice, which means your jawless fish, okay? Those are very primitive, and the closest to the tunicates are the first chordates. Then you have your cartilaginous, which means chondrichthyes, that's your sharks, skates, and rays, okay? And then, which makes up, I think in the short quick PowerPoint, 90, I want to say it's in the PowerPoint, 90 some odd percent are your bony fish. This is all what you're familiar with, freshwater fish, carp, bass, catfish, and so on, pike, walleye, and so on, okay? So bony fish, or what they call ostichthyes, okay? Which are extremely large words, and those are some of the few real elaborate Latin-based words that I can pronounce. And if I was playing Scrabble and I had enough levers, I'd win, okay? All right, so let's talk about a little bit of the history and evolution of fish. Fish are considered to be the most primitive living vertebrates, obviously because aquatic base, same thing kind of like the pecking order when we talked about invertebrates, okay? And how they move up the evolutionary chain, all right? The first fish were jawless, like we said, or before even the Agatha, but they had these bony plates. They looked like little armored tanks. They were real cumbersome, didn't move a lot. A lot of them were probably more bottom dwellers in the sand and so on. We know this from a lot of the fossils, okay? During the Ordovician period, which would be during the geological time scale. How do we know this time frame with the Silurian is because of fossils and way back to radioactive dating, okay? We're experts on that. They went through major adaptation, lots of times, lots of change. So when they started losing like these big cumbersome, like they refer to armor plating, kind of like an exo-type skeleton, they became more mobile. They became better hunters, better adapted. They could migrate to various other areas. This probably had a lot to do with them even surviving, okay? And more what we refer to as nomadic, or just traveling, okay, in general. Others were still armored, but even had jaws. So they started having the hinged mouths, which was also a huge huge evolutionary adjustment to as well. Okay. So jaws made it possible, obviously, and more versatile to become omnivoric type, where they not only could eat plants instead of and animals, but also more importantly defend themselves as well. So they weren't just filter feeders like your basking sharks and various other ones and plankton feeders that we have now today. They actually had a more abundant source of food. Another innovations were they had paired pectoral fins, which would be like, we call them like our arms, but you know, the pectoral fins right off the pectoralis major muscles, okay? And pelvic, meaning the paired fins around the hip region. Just like the pelvic bone, they have pelvic fins. These fins gave fish more control over movement, so they were able to turn on a dime, swim faster, more aerodynamic, therefore they moved better, more agile, better chance of survival, and establishing fitness. Good old-fashioned, basic, instinctual, evolutionary needs of all animals, okay? So these fins would eventually evolve into limbs, and we're talking down the road at some point when the first, what they call fin-lobed, kind of like what a seal would look like, where they would push up on the pectoral fins, the muscles and the collarbone region, which is kind of a clavicle, which has changed for us because once we started walking upright, but this thickened, gave them more support to where they eventually had your terrestrial vertebrates that went out on land, first amphibians, and even some of what they called the lungfish and so on, but that's a whole nother category. But we started to see a trend as, hey, let's get out of this water, let's go on land for whatever purposes, okay? And this is from fossils. So although the early jawed fishes disappeared, from the jawed fishes came the two large classes we talked about. The cartilaginous fish, which are chondrichthyes, are sharks, skates, and rays. And then the bony fish, which we call ostichthyes, which makes up 97% to this day of all living species. I mean, they have the bones, okay? That's basically what it means, okay? So our jawless fish, or Agatha, A-G-H-T-H-A, Agatha, are mostly the lampreys and hagfishes, okay? Those are the two main large groups of them, I guess, that to this day. They are the only vertebrates that don't have a backbone. They still have that true notochord, so that puts them in relevance to, or in comparison to vertebrates, it's kind of like how the sponges were to the invertebrates, as these guys are to vertebrates, okay? So, because they still have this true notochord and not have the fused backbone to protect the spinal cord. Lampreys are typically filter feeders in a sense as larvae, and then become parasitic. You might have seen anytime those remora type things that are attached to underbelly jaws, dorsal fins, pectoral fins, caudal fins of fish. If you've ever been to a sea aquarium and you've seen some of them circular like marks on the side, looks like somebody took a soup can and went like this, that would have been a scar left from some type of maybe a lamprey / remora hagfish that attached like a parasite, like a tick or mosquito, and then was feeding off them. So that's the term parasite. All right. They rarely don't want to kill the host, obviously, because if they kill the host, then they lose sight of the food. Okay. So that's what parasites are. So there's a hagfish down there. Kind of looks silly. It looks kind of like a potato spud. If you ever seen a potato in the pantry that's been left there a long time, grows those little spuds on it. But these are all kind of detectors along the bottom they use for feelers and sensoreceptors, and there's its eyes and kind of various things. This is just a computer-generated picture of the skeleton showing also the notochord here, the hollow straw, and the spinal cord that supports that. Benthic feeders is another name for funnel / bottom feeders. That's just another evolution or a science term associated with that. Hagfish are in that category. They lack eyes, but these are the light detectors at the end of the stalk. They can, so they're very primitive, okay? And they're found, they lack eyes, but do have light detect, like I said, on regions of their bodies, all right? Then we get to our chondrichthyes, or there's how to spell chondrichthyes. That's a big fancy word. One of the few ones I can spell. But here's a shark. We're going to spend more time, so we'll have a more elaborate PowerPoint on sharks because it's a lot of fun. And that also leads us into our first large dissection of sharks in a week or so. With the snow days, might have put us a little behind, but maybe not. We'll see how that goes. Okay, but it's coming real soon. So we spend more time on the second class because they're just interesting. Got Shark Week and all that kind of stuff and whatnot. Okay. This is a lower number. It's obviously a little higher than that, but most of the 225 living shark species have large curved tails, torpedo-shaped bodies, and so on. So the general type. Like when I look at this one, I know this one looks really vicious and mean, but you can tell by the bluntness of its nose, the bluntness of its pectoral fins, and its really flat kind of blobby body. It's not built for speed. They are bottom feeders because of that, because of the way they're designed. They don't have that nice aerodynamic like a mako or a great white or a tiger, So a lot of times, like sharks, even though, not all sharks are thought of as jaws, and so on, but a lot of them are still designed just like birds and various other things for their environment or their niche where they call home. Bottom feeders, reef feeders, open water, deep water trenches, cold water, whatever it really might be, okay? And most importantly, they have an endoskeleton that's made of cartilage. That's the term, cartilaginous body. They also have tooth and scales, or teeth and scales as well. Okay, they're skates and rays. They look to me. There's a couple little technical things like measuring this and that, but to me, stingrays and skates look the same. So many or may not have known that they have that. They have that wing-like pectoral fins. And they do look very, very similar, but they're all in the same category, okay? And the last one are osteichthyes, bony fish. 40% of all vertebrates are bony fish, and of the fish, like you said, 97, 98% are all that as well. Almost all belong to the enormous group called the ray-finned, which are the rays, like the spines that come up if you ever caught a bluegill or bass or whatever. You get up behind there, if not, little spikes can poke you in the hand and painful type stuff, if you ever had that happen. Refers to the bony spines, like I said, by skin that forms on the fins. Only 7 living species of bony fish are not classified as ray fin. I mean, that's just a general fact of it, but the majority of them are classified as ray fin or bony fish, aka osteichthyes, okay, in Latin. Lungfish use their gills to obviously eliminate carbon dioxide, so obviously the gill slits, gulping in air. Lungfish are the ones that are kind of a little bit of the transitional fish that eventually gave rise to our amphibians. There are some of them, like the goby, I think, is one that comes off top hand, that when drought things, they get up thing, and it looks like they're just kind of making this kind of circular mouth thing, but they can actually gulp air in, and their swim bladder, which gives them buoyancy. Also works as a modified lung that they can breathe air and still breathe air through across their gills. So that's the term lungfish. Okay. During the dry season, like I said, they burrow in the mud and they go dormant. Almost looks like they're dead, but they're not. Okay. There's only one true species that still follows this to this day. That's the coelacanth, which looks kind of like a large grouper type fish. I got a picture on the next one. They have few bones in their base fins, and several are homologous structures as well. Okay, so kind of in a nutshell here, without going that, and that's these things, these large grouper looking. That's the ones that do that. They look they're not quite as big as they look in this picture, but this picture makes them look like big, like a grouper. Okay. So that was just real quick going through the classes of fish for you. That I'll post, bright lights, that I'll post here in a second, giving you a little bit of attention to detail. So I only posted one quick little screen assignment, and then the PowerPoint with this as well, and so on. The second one will be more specifically when we start talking about chondrichthyes and shark, and there might be a little bit of, for some fun things where you learn about some different Missouri fish locally, like a little picture test type stuff. But anyways, I'll go ahead and post this up. I'll let you guys know about it. You can look through it, and there'll be a couple things. Of course, tomorrow, Wednesday, is a study day. Evaluate that, and if you need to get a hold of me, I'm still up here every day. I'm here till 5 again today. All right. Once again, on the assignments, don't worry if you've already got them done hard copy. Just make sure you turn them into the buckets when you come up here. Next class period, I see you. Like I said, no big deal. The reason I just wanted to go through and send that out just to make sure, one day turns into 2, and then a week, and next thing you know, you're 2 weeks behind, and you're still and we don't want to dig ourselves a hole here starting after the semester. Okay? All right, troops. See you soon. Bye.